but he gets a new private jet like every couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
That's ridiculous.
Why is that ridiculous?
Why does he need a private jet?
Well, if he's doing a lot of speaking engagements all over the world, that would be a reason to need one.
No, you don't need a private jet. Why can't he fly commercial? Fly first class. Why can't he fly commercial? Why can they not take his money?
Why doesn't Taylor Swift fly commercial?
Because Taylor Swift is not a preacher.
But why doesn't she fly commercial?
Because she's not. We're talking about different standards.
No.
Yeah.
I'm talking about practical reasons why someone wouldn't fly commercial. Why wouldn't Taylor Swift fly commercial?
Well, she's an Uber celebrity.
Okay, so she would get lots of people, probably would stampede the gates and all. Now, maybe these preachers aren't going to get stampeded at the gates, but
they're not.
They've reached a level of notoriety that they would get probably hounded pretty, like, not at the same level as Taylor Swift. It would be very difficult for them to travel commercially.
To buy one every couple of years.
How many have they given away?
What do you mean given away?
Have they given their jets to other ministries, or
no? They turn them in like a car.
How do you know?
Because that's what their statements say. Like, you can look up their.
Okay. I've never looked at them, so I don't.
Well, these are people that hate these kind of people, and big reasons why they don't go to church or give money to church is because of people like this. To me, when you take on a pastoral role, you're not meant to be a millionaire.
Yeah, I don't agree with that.
That's okay.
Because for one, now, I don't know any of these pastors personally, so they might be jerks. I don't know.
But regardless,
or they might have bad intentions.
What if they're nice people? They could be nice people. Let's take their attitude and their people's opinions away. Let's just talk about their finances.
Right. So that's what I'm getting at, is without knowing anything about them personally. I don't understand. And I honestly, and people may not believe this if you don't know me personally. If you know me personally, you know that I wouldn't lie about this, I guess. But if you don't, whatever, you may not believe me. I had this same view even before because I'm full transparency, because I'm in the full-time ministry now. So I have a salary at my church. And I'm an ordained pastor. So people will think that there's a bias to what I'm about to say, right? But
you're not making millions.
But this was strange to me even before where my current career is now. Why people would get so upset about this. Because the way that I saw it is, for one, I don't know how much they're actually giving away. I don't know what they are pouring. Maybe they are pouring a lot into their own church.
But you can see by the way they live.
But once you reach a certain level of wealth, you may not be able to see that by the way they live.
There's no reason for a leader of a church. Like, that's like saying, would Paul live in that way?
You say there's no reason, but that's so subjective. Like, how do you draw a line to where you say, okay, $200,000, that's the most that any pastor should ever live on. And if they exceed, they just need to give the rest of that all away.
Why not?
Well, I'm not saying if the Lord told them to and put that on their heart, then absolutely. But
I'm telling you,
but I'm not going to say that that's what they should do. If they're given 10% and they're generous, they have a generous heart.
Well, I'll tell you what, if you're making $10 million a year and you're giving 10% of it, it's not stressing you.
It's not about being stressed. It's about a generous heart. No one should be stressed about, if people that we're going to dive back into the tithing.
But I'm just saying,
everyone still has to live with what they have. So someone that makes $30,000, if it's on their heart and they're convinced that they want to tithe and it's important to them, and they understand where their provision comes from, and they have their full and total trust of their finances in God, they should be able to live on $27,000 with the same comfort in their mind, not the same types of comfort.
Yeah, you're talking about luxury versus poverty, though.
But that's I mean, some of this is coming because I've especially just getting back from
Oh,
Mexico,
I know.
right? And seeing how
Yeah.
those people live. And
We are blessed just
well,
for where I'm at.
it's not just that. It's our whole viewpoint towards what we consider being blessed with comfort. And our whole viewpoint of what is comfort. And like it's hard for me to put into words, but last year even it completely changed my mindset of viewing like, and not that I take this for granted anyways, like my home and air conditioning and heat and all, like I don't
Clean
take any of
water,
that
warm
stuff. Right. I
showers.
don't take
Yeah,
any of
I
that for
get it. I
granted.
get what you're talking
And I
about.
never did any before, but because I had this initial thought last year, my first time being down there, and I thought, man, I am so thankful for what I have back at home. But the Holy Spirit kind of was like, that's not necessarily the right way to see it. Is that viewpoint of, rich people can live like rich people and still give 10%, and someone that's and it not mean much to them. I mean, I guess I guess I kind of get it, but what I'm saying is I don't know that that should be the way that it should be looked at, because 10% is still the same
About their
percentage.
expenditures as far as like
Well, that's what I was saying.
having
We don't want to
multiple
focus too much on
million-dollar
that
homes,
example, but
multiple $1 million homes, $1 million or hundreds of thousands of dollars in cars.
yeah.
Like these are worldly attributes.
Here's maybe what the focus should be on is we don't know how generous they are, regardless of how they're living.
So to my question would be,
Because someone that makes 30,000, their generosity will look different than what someone that makes 30 million, right? But it's still, the generous heart is still the same.
okay, but what I'm saying
The person
is,
that makes 30,000 still needs to have a generous heart, even though that might
I'm talking
hurt
about
different.
preachers though, specifically.
Right.
You can't compare them to Taylor Swift. And I get your argument there. I can understand, okay, maybe having a private jet or using a private jet when you're considered a celebrity as a preacher, maybe that makes sense. Okay. I didn't really view it as like them getting hassled and stuff like that. Now,
Especially if you're doing kingdom work. Like if you're going to fly to Germany and preach and then fly to some other part of the world and preach and then fly, like how could you could make the argument you could do more kingdom work with a jet. I'm not saying that they should all have private jets. I'm just saying that's a plausible way to look at it.
But
Yeah.
If a preacher is dedicating their life to the church,
Right.
they should collect money from the church.
Right.
Now, if a preacher's not like dedicated solely, then they should have a job and should do a job and minister.
Right.
So I believe that. But I also believe like if you sat down and talked to Paul or Jesus and said, does a preacher need to have a Land Rover? They're going to say no.
I mean, that's a style.
It is a worldly desire. And
in and of itself, that's not a bad thing to me.
What, a worldly desire?
Not a worldly desire, but like okay, let's say hypothetically, this podcast becomes one of the most successful podcasts out there. We reach Joe Rogan level, right? Joe Rogan signed like $100 million 10-year deal or something.
That's what we're looking for.
With Spotify. If anybody wants to give us 100 million, we accept.
Be the first.
So let's say that this podcast takes off and that becomes a huge income, right?
Right.
So am I all of a sudden, now I've had a generous heart. Nothing's changed about my generous heart. I'm generous now with what I have. I'd be generous with 100 million.
So if you're making $100 million,
and so let's say we build a different house. Now, me personally, that's not my style. Like, I don't think I would enjoy being in a giant mansion. There are things that I would like about having in a house, but I wouldn't want a big giant house. I don't think. I wouldn't want super extravagant, crazy things, but I like Mustangs. If I could afford it, I'd probably have a Mustang. And along with, it'd be nice. It'd be cool to have just an everyday driver car that's really nice, that has a lot of amenities in it. It'd also be really cool to have a truck and a motorcycle. Like, I love motorcycles. So like, would if I'm successful, if God downloads an idea in me, which he has, I believe that this was a part of God pushing me into something, or to write a book. If God downloads in me an idea to write a book and I become a New York Times bestseller and I have multi-million dollars, why is that a bad thing? And I'm still a pastor at my church.
Because you you were called to be a pastor first. Like that's your calling. So along with,
But I
like,
could also be
being,
called to write a book that helps
but
a lot of people. And I could
what
also
I'm
be
saying
called to
is,
do a
so
podcast that helps a lot of people.
if you're making millions of dollars off of your podcast, you should still be able to leave meagerly as an example, because you took a role of being a pastor, and not saying, because you're looking at, they're living kind of for the world now. They're making their money off the church and their books. They might write a book, but that's God's word, right? So why not take all that profit that you make from a book and put it into the church? Why not do the things that,
Well, that's what I'm saying is you
could live?
you don't know that they haven't in the past.
But I'm saying
Because
there's no reason for
there's a biblical principle of sowing and reaping. And I don't know what they've sowed into.
Well, I'm just saying, in my opinion, I don't know when we want to draw the hook. Maybe we want to stop at my opinion. But see, we're talking about the fine line is where you're arguing. Like, where you draw the, now I'm talking
How
about,
do you draw the line?
I'm talking about, you can't say
Like,
that's
how do
not
you-
excessive.
But that's the thing is how can at the same time, how can you say it's excessive?
Because it's just living for the world. What's the purpose? What is the reason to have all that? Just because you want it?
Because
that's not what you're supposed to look for.
I have a house here in my hometown near my family. We like to go to Florida, so I have a house in Florida so that we can go to Florida sometimes. And I'm just thinking of any reason why you might have more than.
Yeah, but you don't need $1 million house to go visit once in a while. We're talking about necessity versus desire and want.
But how do you say that?
The Bible says it. The Bible sets a standard for what pastors,
for how big a house should be.
No,
well,
but how they are
saying.
But how they are.
The line can keep changing, because you could say, the logic that you're using is the same logic that can say, well, they don't need a house more than, like, we don't need houses like this. We can live just fine in a
I'm not talking about
little concrete square with a couple of
normal people.
With a couple of
not talking about normal people.
hammocks.
Not talking about normal people. I'm talking about preachers only.
So I should have a small house with a couple of hammocks because I'm a pastor.
Say that.
Well, that's what I'm saying though, is like, if you draw the line here, and you have to give logic why that line is drawn there.
Okay.
And that same logic can be applied to another line.
$500,000 is right now more than enough to live comfortably.
Well, I agree with that.
So there's your line.
so you just
you asked me to draw a line. I drew
authority. One. Okay, so but based on one logic, because somebody else would say, no, 500,000 is too much. They can do that at 300,000.
So in that mindset, to have all these things that to me are luxuries is where you draw the line. Like,
the only line that's drawn with luxury is if it becomes an idol in your life. That's the only line that's drawn with it for me.
Well, I just hope that
if you're writing books, here's the thing. If you're a pastor that's writing books to attain the luxury, that's a problem.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
If you're
neither of us can judge that.
Doing a podcast with the intention of being able to buy a private jet, that's a problem. That's where my whole stance is it shouldn't just be a problem just to have those things. And I don't know anything about the hearts of those pastors.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's the only thing I can't argue.
I don't know what they've given away. I don't know how many jets they've given away. I don't know how many homes they've given away.
I mean,
I don't know how many vehicles they've given away.
We could look all that up.
And someone could look at a Land Rover and be like, man, I really like that car, I want to buy that car. I've got the cash to buy that car. I'm going to buy that car in cash. And they may have given away 10 other cars before they got that Land Rover. So those other 10 cars aren't giving those away. That's not generous enough to be able to drive a Land Rover around.
Not with your pastor.
I still got to drive around a Mazda 6, which I love, by the way. But I give away 10 cars and I can't drive a something else
$20,000 car.
I mean, I don't like those kind of cars anyways, but I wouldn't drive a Lambo or Porsche. I probably wouldn't drive anything like that anyways, because that's just not my style. But I'm not going to disparage another
if we're going to,
because it is their style.
So if
everyone might be right in their criticism of these other wealthy pastors in the way that, because they might have idols in their life. They may be idolizing money, and that may be their intentions for why they write books or why they do speaking engagements. It may all be motivated by money, and that would be 100% wrong. But if God brings wealth into my life because it's a biblical principle of sowing and reaping, and what I'm sowing, and if I'm following what and listening to God about what I'm supposed to be doing, what he wants me to do, and if he downloads something in me that ends up making me millions, and I'm generous with it, and I give like that, I don't see anything wrong in that, because that's part of like God's promise. That's part of the promise of and the principle of sowing and reaping.
So we've taken sowing and reaping so much in our society now that it equals money. Everything that is preached,
it's a part of it. Yes.
There's nothing in the Bible that says it's about money. It always uses as an example.
Because it encompasses everything. It's
right.
not. It's not just
idolize money. Everything we have that's all sowing and reaping, tithing. If you reap what you sow, you give more money. Your blessings, everything is money.
Well, some of those messages are not right either.
But I'm just saying, anytime you use sowing and reaping from a biblical standpoint in the church nowadays,
but I'm using it only because that's what we are talking about as wealth. But you're right. What you reap, the harvest that you reap, is not just money, because you're not. And here's the thing about sowing and reaping is Jesus said the sower sows the word, and it's the word that's sown, and there's a harvest that comes from sowing the word. And
but who says that's money? Why is it not souls to the kingdom?
Well, that's part of it too. That's what I'm saying. It's everything.
But I don't
it's
think
not just money, but it doesn't exclude
Jesus
money either.
Was so against money.
Wasn't against money. He was against idols and idolizing.
Yeah, but he was
money.
I'm not 100% sure, and you can, because you know the Bible way better than I do.
Marginally, maybe, but I'm not an expert.
Well, I didn't say you're an expert, but you know more than I do. You do. But has been said that Jesus talks more about money than really anything else in the Bible, or not necessarily uses the term money, but people for sowing and reaping might translate it into he's talking about money here, because that was his number, that he knew that would be the biggest competition for us Gentiles in the future. That was a theory that people have talked about and preachers have spoken about. Like, Jesus knew that money would be the driver of everything, and people would choose money more over heaven.
Well, what he does say, what the Bible does say, is the love of money is the root of all evil.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Not
so
the physicality of
right.
money,
And so that's what I'm saying is pastors that love money, that's a pastor that's going to get himself in a lot of trouble.
Or even tempt himself with that luxury, like that amount of wealth, because you're talking about, I mean, pastors are going to be held accountable at a different standard than a regular, person.
Right.
And so it's like,
but if I'm checking all the other boxes of it, then like, why is it bad because I enjoy riding motorcycles that I have a motorcycle? And why is it bad that I also really like, 1960, is it 69? What's the Shelby Mustang Eleanor in Gone with 60 Seconds?
I
It's
can't
late
even,
60s.
I don't even look at those cars. I can't even fit in them.
What if I have a late 60s, and I really think those are cool, so I have a late 60s Mustang, and then I have an everyday driver that I like, that's really comfortable and has a lot of amenities, and like that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't understand why, if I have the means to live that way because of other things that God has downloaded in me, and I'm generous and all those other things, like, I just don't understand why that counts as excess.
So because you're talking from someone that's not there right now. So if you got there and you're saying,
well, I may get there, and
let's
and
move
God
the
may
line.
say not have those things. I may get there and God say, no, you can't, you shouldn't have these things, and I'll obey. Like, I'll obey.
Well, hopefully.
but
I'm saying you're walking that line where the devil can get a hold of it and saying, then you move the line. Like you said, no, do I think having a daily driver, and if you like a luxury car and you like a motorcycle, sure, you can have those three things. That's not excess. To me, it's unnecessary, but I guess, like you said, where your heart lies, I can't judge that. But then you're like, well, I got all this other money, so maybe a Lamborghini's fine too. And maybe I can have a vacation home that's worth $1 million and have this for $1 million and this for $1 million and this and
personally,
to me, becomes excess.
And personally, like, that's just not
to see how the world's going right now. Well, I know that. I know your heart.
But that's why it's hard for me to condemn someone else, because it is. Because someone else can just as easily say, well, you shouldn't have a motorcycle and a classic Mustang and an everyday driver that's I don't even know what kind of everyday driver I would have, but like, because I'm not really into
Chevy Colorado.
I don't know if I
smells like
another Colorado, but something like a Cadillac. I don't know. I don't even know that I like Cadillacs, but I'm just throwing that out there as like a luxury car. There would be someone else that would say that that's too much too. Like,
and it might be too much.
That's what I'm saying. Like, it's just a constant, like, unless I'm driving some hoopty, like, that's how I have to.
I'm saying you could drive a reliable car. If it fits in a reasonable salary, then you afford the car.
Who decides what's reasonable?
I guess I do. You're asking me.
But who? So that might just be your opinion on what's reasonable. But I look at things too as like, because I don't necessarily care what other people think. It's what does it say scripturally? What is God telling me about the situation?
Well, when it doesn't say scripturally, when doesn't it? Because it doesn't tell you the draw line. I know it tells that
it talks about idols and the love of money. That stuff's pretty clear.
Well, yeah.
So that's what I'm saying is, if I don't love money and it's not an idol in my life, and I'm generous, the Bible talks about being generous, being a cheerful giver.
I guess it goes back to like
all of those things, all of those scriptural boxes. Like, if I'm checking all those boxes, I don't even know if that's the right way to describe it. But if my heart's in the right place, and I still after all that, I still have 15 million, and I want a house in Florida, a nice house in Florida for the family to go to, that's on Disney because they like going to Disney or whatever, or we go, travel the world a lot, or I don't know, whatever. I'm just throwing out hypotheticals that, like those, then that I don't see anything biblically that God would say no. Now, if God talked to me and said, hey, you shouldn't do this or that, like, I'm going to listen to the prompting of the Holy Spirit and the leading of the Holy Spirit. That's how I decided not to drink anymore, was through the Holy Spirit prompting me. But other than that, like, that's not, I don't see that as an issue.
Courtney, I'm sorry, we're not destined to be rich.
So even, let's say it's 100 million for easy math. Yeah. We'll say 100 million. 1% of that is $1 million. Now, what someone lives on with $1 million could look like excess to someone, but they literally gave away 99% of it. But you're still going to say that they're living in excess for $1 million when they've given away 99%?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how you make that argument.
Because you're a different role in life.
No, I just think that's the total wrong way to look at it.
Well, you can play the trumpet if you want to. But my saying will be,
maybe we'll.
but his house is worth $10.5 million at 17,000 square feet.
I don't know why that's a problem. I wouldn't want a house that big, probably, but I don't. It's not a. It's not a
ridiculous.
sin.
I didn't say it's sin.
Okay, well, if it's not a sin, then you shouldn't have a problem with it as a Christian.
Well, I can't say it's a sin because I don't know his heart. Now, if I knew his heart, then I could say it's a sin.
Well,
only God knows his heart,
right? And that's what I'm saying is.
But I'm saying they're bad examples.
How could that be a bad example?
Because that's not how a preacher should live.
All right. Well,
a preacher should not live in a $10 million house.
I don't see how you make that argument.
Because if they lived in $1 million house, they could take the rest of the 9 million and feed the poor. Just with that.
Maybe they've already given 10 million and
give
fed
more.
The poor.
There's always poor.
Well, I'm just saying.
There's no way there's no preacher in the world that makes enough money to feed every person.
Again, I'm just saying
they've given what they felt like.
Line? Where's the line then?
Where's the line? Where they're living comfortably. That's the line. Comfortably, where their water's running. They don't have to worry about food. They don't have to worry about what these poor and orphans and all these other people are doing.
There would be people in Chocom Beach that would tell you they're living comfortably.
Who?
In the village that I went to in Mexico.
Well, that becomes a thing of not really knowing better.
Why is that better?
What do you mean?
That's part of what the Holy Spirit showed me down there. Was it's not about the things. Anyways, you don't know that Joel Osteen hasn't done things like that with a lot of money, and helped a lot of remote villages get a lot of.
But he could help more. I understand they probably do help. I'm not denying that they.
And that's what I'm saying is just like how can any of us be the one that decides where the appropriate line is?
Because I feel like everybody knows the appropriate line.
It could be everyone has a different view of it.
Everybody
and that's why I go back to where the heart of it is. To me, that's the line. That mindset, though, that you're talking about is, well, you could do more. You could do more. You could do more. That line can just keep going.
It should always go
to where, you could say that I could sell this house and, have 300,000 to feed people with.
I mean,
and live in a tiny home.
John the Baptist had so much faith he did it. He ate crickets and peanut butter or whatever it was. I can't remember.
Peanut butter?
Honey, locusts and honey.
John the Baptist eating PB&Js out in the
wilderness. So, I mean, if we had strong enough faith, I mean, technically, that's how we probably should live. Jesus calls people to drop everything and follow him, but it's hard for the rich man to do that.
So that's part of my point in the heart, right? Is who are any of us to point the finger at someone else when there's something more that we can be doing too?
Well, I'm not saying that. I'm saying these guys are living, it's obvious, and they're leaders. We're not talking about everyday people. We're talking about people that are supposed to be examples of Christ's church above all.
Okay, so if that's the example, then that means everyone else is supposed to be living that way too, then, right?
We're supposed to strive that way, yeah.
Okay, so if someone's gonna point the finger at someone else, because Jesus also says you got to pluck out the splinter in your eye or the log in your own eye before you're pointing out someone else's splinter. So, and if someone says, "Well, I give a lot, I'm generous, and I'm this and I'm that," and it's okay. Well, if they need to be more generous, okay, well then how can you be more generous too? Like, that's all I'm saying is if you start getting down this road of,
well, that's what I strive to be. How can I be more generous? I'm not super wealthy. So how can I be more generous in things that aren't money wise? So yeah, and there are examples of like, I would love to have that money. And it's crazy. Like when I think of like, if I won millions of dollars, like a lottery, I never play it, but if I won it, I would probably set up a CD account, put some money in it that paid me, basically your high end salary, so we could live and whatever. My wife wouldn't have to work, and we could travel a little bit, and I would give all of it away, the rest of it.
Why you gotta travel?
Why do I gotta travel?
Yeah.
Because God created the world to experience.
Well, I mean, you could take that money that you're traveling with and
but
do
traveling
something
is
else. I'm just
I
saying
know what
that
you're saying,
there can be an argument for everyone, every situation.
well, yeah, but that's just being an antagonist right
Not
there.
really,
Yeah, it is.
because I'm just trying to
We're
use the
talking
same
about-
logic.
We're not, though,
It doesn't seem like we're not.
because you're talking about things that these people can touch right now and change is way greater than what I can do with my meager wealth.
But but why is the mindset different then, I guess?
What do you mean? Why is the mindset
If
different?
just because their reach is farther than your reach monetarily, why is the mindset different towards them?
Because they took the role of being a leader of Christ's church. That's the difference.
But why?
That's why they're held at a different standard on judgment,
Yes, but again,
because they're
I
not
don't know, we're
supposed to
kinda
live like
talking in
we are.
circles, but
They're not supposed to
but
live
if they're
like
an
us.
example, you keep calling them an example. So if they're an example, if that's how, then that's an example is how we're supposed to live too.
Well, in a perfect world, we all would live that way.
Well,
So yeah, we should
then,
all try. Then I don't disagree with you.
so then all Christians should
Absolutely.
not have that stuff then either.
Absolutely, we should all be able to get along harmony. You know what they call that? Heaven.
But the standard to me is where the love is. If someone's loving money, that's 100% wrong. No matter if you're a Christian or not, or pastor, like that's what Jesus preached against. And the rich young ruler that walked away, all Jesus did was reveal where his love is.
Right.
That's all that was. And the whole thing about, it's easier, for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than it is for, a rich man to get into heaven, is because of, do people get rich because they love money? And if they're loving money, then that's
Well, you can
problem,
get
right?
rich not loving money and then turn to loving money.
Yeah, I agree with that.
That's why it becomes that.
And maybe some of those pastors have.
That's why it's like,
I'm just saying that that's not the way that someone lives, because it's so subjective as to what excess is.
I mean, I think we can all draw the line that they live in excess. There's no way we're talking about these people. You cannot say it's not excess.
But you keep saying that, but how do you determine the line? That's my whole point the whole time.
Okay, then you take the
especially
line
after I just got back from a country in those villages that I saw, and you could make the argument that because there's running water in a house, that's excess compared to everyone else that doesn't have running water.
Well,
my whole point is that excess is so subjective, because excess would look different where I just came from. What would be considered excess would look a lot different where I'm at than what we look at as excess. So that's why I'm saying, when you're like, it's obvious that it's, well, obvious why? Why is it obvious?
99.9%. And you could change those people's lives down there. You would do that, right? Because that's basically showing what Christ is. And that's going to bring more people to Christ than them worrying about their $17 million house.
Well, but that's what I'm saying, is if 99% is still leaves me with 10 million,
then give it away. Then give it all away to where you don't need a $10 million house. You just don't.
I'm not saying I need a $10 million house.
I'm saying Joel Osteen don't need one, or whatever the other guy's name is.
I don't need this house. You don't need your size of house.
Oh, I need my house because my house is tiny.
You don't need your size of house.
Could you make do with a smaller house? That's different than needing. Like my kids
use the word need.
My kids, 17,000 square feet. is probably bigger than this cul-de-sac. It is huge.
Yeah, it's big
for 2 people.
Maybe he has lots of family that comes in and stays, and I don't know. Does he have kids? Does he have grandkids? Does he have brothers and sisters? And
Man, he ain't
maybe they have big
you ain't going to
Thanksgivings
convince
and
me
big
that he's
Christmases.
filling up them houses.
I'm not. All I'm saying is that the line can keep moving depending on whoever's looking at it, and that's why. So this is I guess how I wrap it up, because you said, yeah, it's my opinion that you asked me, but what I'm saying is from a right and wrong stance. What is wrong is if someone loves money and they idolize a $17 million or whatever you said it was. That's wrong. But for me to say without beyond that, because again, you can just keep chipping away all the way down to where
what you're doing is
a pastor should only live on a basic need then. And if someone says, well, now hold on, a reasonable house. Okay, why is it reasonable? Because you say it's reasonable? Because society says it's reasonable? That's what I'm saying is people try to attach definitions of what reasonable is or what excess is, and they really don't. There's really no real meaning behind any of it.
Well, I guess
so. The only thing that matters then is the heart behind it. Now, you might be able to say the argument is, well, there's no way that they absolutely love money by living in a house that way. To me, that's more of an argument.
Well, that's something that we can't judge, though. Not to be rich.
He doesn't tell you not to be rich.
He tells you not to be rich.
He doesn't tell you not to be rich. That's where we separate, I guess.
I think he doesn't
because it's about the heart and the love.
I think he tells you to stay away from it.
Side of it, I guess.
Jolting, you need to be poor.
But pastors don't
give money away more.
Pastors don't need to be poor. That's for sure.
I don't think they should be poor. I said that. I think they should live modest lives.
But
modest.
But again, there's another word that you give a definition to that. Like, what does that even mean to live modest? Everyone has a different view of what
Webster
modest
has what modest is.
Maybe, but how do you attach it to what?
We're just going to keep talking about this.
I know it just keeps going in a circle.
But... I don't know. I mean, I'll give it to you. You made very valid points, even though I still don't agree with the points, because I still feel that tug where it's like, I don't think that they should live that way, because I don't think,
And again, I don't want to live that way. It's not like that I want to live that way, and that's why I'm trying to defend it.
I agree with you that there is like who draws the line, right?
Yeah.
But I feel like if there was a line to be drawn, it would come from prayer, and I feel like the answer is there. Now, I don't make that much money, so I can't pray about that and say, am I too wealthy, God?
I guess that's we can end it on that.
I would like
to cut it up. So
we're waiting for that Joe Rogan contract.
Hit me up, Spotify. I got 71 subscribers.
Send the check in my mailbox.
Yeah. And then we'll give it all away.
I will give it all away.
All right. I think that's it.
All right.
So that's our 2 cents. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.